Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this week's Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about how leadership teams spend time together. I've been on leadership teams before where every time I leave a meeting with my peers, I roll my eyes and I think, the old trope, I just survived another meeting that could have been an email,
Yep.
where I feel that way. And then I've also been on leadership teams where I am just like starved for another get together or another meeting because I feel like what got solved, what got accomplished was really, really great. And that it couldn't have been solved on our own. There's a difference between that feeling and I'm trying to kind of put together what it looks like for one versus the other and the commonalities that exist when you leave a meeting with your peer group thinking, oh, that was frustrating, or we didn't get anything done, or you think you got a lot of stuff done, but then you walk away and an hour later you're thinking, what did we really get done? Versus the ones where you walk away going, oh, that was amazing. Have you had any experience of this or, meetings where you just think that was so good versus ones where you're like, I'd rather have my time back?
No, absolutely. Yes. Yes. In a long career, there have been plenty of meetings that I'm just like, well, I don't even know why we got here. Like it felt like we had a meeting for the sake of having a meeting.
Yeah.
And that happens. And it happens a lot, unfortunately. And I think that it's like when you have certain cadences or certain expectations of coming together, if you don't have the intent or if you don't have, the ability to say like, well, what are the things that are necessary for all of us to be here? I think it was like we talked about this on the podcast maybe a couple of years ago with Elon Musk and like his whole like get up and walk away. Like if there's no value in this meeting in the first like 4 minutes, like leave, which we laughed about then, we laugh about again. But like it's so true. It's like if the collective in this room isn't working to solve for the thing that only the collective of this room can solve for, then really it is just a useless meeting because everything else can be done one-to-one or in a different way or via email or via phone call. So yes, 100%. I've been in those meetings. And then the ones that I've enjoyed the most are the ones that have a very clear agenda and the topics and the subjects are things that everybody should either know about, hear about, or discuss, or make decisions on, and have a space for dialogue and debate. Like that's what the intent is, so that whatever it is that we walk out with has had a chance to kind of breathe and live, and make sure that the best strategy wins.
Right. I think where leaders, kind of trip up on this is that I think it is important to have a cadence when it comes to meeting as a team, because at the end of the day, there will be people who won't call out a need to have a team meeting with your peer group. They don't want to be the one to say, I think we need to all sit down together. But they will speak their mind in a setting where it's kind of set up for them to be able to speak their mind. And so having a cadence is important, whether that's, whether it's monthly or quarterly or weekly, whatever works for your team is what you should do. But what comes along with that is the commitment to honoring that time by saying, hey, if something doesn't feel like we need this time, if you schedule a 2-hour meeting once every month with your leadership team, and as you're approaching that, it seems like it could be a 30-minute meeting, there's nothing wrong with saying this only needs to be a 30-minute meeting. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, maybe we need 4 hours this time. Let's make sure we get that on the schedule. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, nothing's really changed since the last time we met. I'm calling an audible here. Maybe we don't need to meet this time. Does anybody want to second that? Or if you are wondering whether or not you need the time, reaching out to people on your peer group and just saying, hey, I'm kind of thinking there's not a lot to go over. Are there things that you want to call out or you want to go over? Is there more I'm missing here, right? Is there more that we need to be talking about that I'm not kind of considering? Because it's this kind of like strict adherence to like, oh, we have a meeting every month and we're going to sit there and do it. You'll find ways to fill the space if you don't have actual ways to fill the space. And that does more harm than not having the meeting to begin with. And so have you ever been in a situation, Lorenzo, where you kind of had to call out in advance, maybe this isn't needed, or you're in the middle of something and you're thinking this is scheduled to go to 4:00, but it's 2:00 and I'm thinking maybe this can end now. Have you ever gotten to a point where you thought this is important enough to end it early? I want to ask you that, but first I want to give it up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, have you ever ended a meeting early or suggested that it ended early because you just felt like it wasn't accomplishing anything that needed everybody in the room to do?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, there's a meeting, like to your point, like a kind of a cadence meeting that we have, and there was not a whole lot of anything new to really talk through, but there were some definitely key things that were coming up that needed to be discussed. And so it was like, look, let's spend the time that we normally have cut out for this to spend the first 30 minutes instead. Let's talk about this very upcoming thing that's really important. Let's have our dialogue. Let's talk through it. Let's get our key points. Is there anything else that we need to discuss that everybody needs to hear? Okay, great. We've done that. Now let's spend the rest of the time all like doing your thing together and maybe break it up into smaller groups or the responsibilities that you have for this strategy. So like, absolutely. I look at meetings. Matter of fact, it just happened the other day. There was a meeting that was scheduled for the morning that was canceled last minute, and the reasoning was like, hey, like there's more important things going on right now, and there's some stuff that needs to happen, and there's nothing new. Like we just need to go out and get this work done. And so they just canceled it right before, and I'm like, cool. Like I'm fine with that. I think it should happen, but I do agree with you that cadence is important and consistency is important, which means if you're going to have cadence and consistency, you also must have an agenda. Like you have to, if you're going to give people the time and space, they need to know what the time and space is supposed to look and sound like, and what are the things that are going to be discussed on a pretty consistent level. That way they know this is the time. Like if I have something here, I know it's going to happen. I know I'm going to have a chance to do it. This will be the time to talk through it. But I also think that in at least in like my leadership and how I see things, like there's the conversation leading up to the meeting where somebody's like, hey, this is something top of mind. I want to bring this to the meeting, right? I'm like, yes, absolutely. That's exactly what you should do with that. Like you could have conversations beforehand, but like that needs to be discussed and decided together collectively. Or that topic, I think everybody needs to hear that topic. And you need to be clear about making sure they understand the expectations. So like 100%, my belief is that if you're going to have whatever your cadence is of meetings, make it consistent enough with an agenda that people know what's expected and can be prepared both mentally, but also like from a strategic standpoint to know what they want to talk about.
Right. The preparedness part is really what it comes down to. And here's another kind of like an analogy here is that I've been in situations where I go to like a town hall type meeting where like there's a leader of my organization or wherever that I'm working at the time. They want to do like a Q&A with employees, and they want questions submitted in advance. And I used to think as like an entry level employee, I would submit these questions to these town halls for the leaders. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, they don't want to call on people in the moment. They don't want to be put on the spot because they don't want to answer the tough questions. They want to filter the questions out. It's like, then I got to a point where I was in a leadership role where people wanted to ask questions of me. And I was like, okay, I don't need to know your questions in advance. I want to make sure that you understand that you can ask anything that you want on your mind. And then I found myself not being able to answer half the questions, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know them in advance enough to be able to do the prep work needed to answer the questions in the moment. And that didn't feel very good either. It was a lot of, you know what, that's a great question. I want to answer you. I don't have the data in front of me because I didn't know the question was going to be asked. And so I need to get back to you on this. And it's the exact same thing. Giving people the answers to the test, so to speak, isn't a bad thing. Telling people what the agenda is of the meeting doesn't allow them to kind of, not be held accountable to something. It allows them to make sure they can bring with them what it is you want from them so that you can have a good relationship. There's no nobility in surprise. You have to have that communication up front so that they can bring what they want. No one feels like that they are unprepared, either as a leader or as someone who reports into the leadership team. These are all things that have to happen in advance. And if you can do that prior to any meeting or get together, you'll find ways of giving people back their time when you didn't need all the time that you necessarily had to schedule.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point and a reminder of like, there's an element where you want to have organic conversation, Q&A, and you want to be able to have a meeting in a space to just talk through certain things. But at the same exact time, the ability to prepare, to consider your thoughts, to have the information, like those things matter. And so like being able to say, these are the things that we're going to talk about every single meeting. And we're going to start with this because this is our largest priority at all time, no matter what. And like, surprise, surprise, you know what the first thing is? People. Yep. and what's going on and what are we seeing and what do we need and where are we at and hiring and training and development and recognition, and it all starts there. And that could, because it's the key element of a lot of how we get work done. But then here's the other agenda points. And again, and it's not that things like what tends to happen in a lot of meetings, like let's report the news.
Sure.
Let's start the first 15 minutes of a meeting reviewing all of the business things or the result things that we want to talk about over the last week or the last month. And it's like, well, are we really waiting for the meeting to find out about how well we did? That should probably happen every single day.
Right.
If not every hour of every single day.
Right.
So like taking the time to like present to one another the thing that we're responsible for making sure that we're aware of, not how I want to spend my time.
Right.
Do we need to talk about that stuff sometimes? Absolutely. But again, what are we solving for? Like what we should be talking about in this space is either first recognizing people doing tremendous work or solving for an opportunity that's a result of potentially a lack of leadership alignment, a lack of an effective strategy, or a lack of execution potentially. Like whatever that's going to be, there could be dialogue there. But reporting the news to one another, that just to me is silly because like we live in the work every single day. But I see a lot of meetings that go that exact way. Let's start with reviewing our business.
Right.
And like, well, what have you been doing for the past 2 weeks while it's been walking all over you? Like why are we waiting for the meeting to talk about this? This shouldn't be a surprise or information that we're sharing for the first time.
There was a study that came out during the pandemic. I think Microsoft did it in coalition with a university that said that the average length of time of meetings during the pandemic and the closures dropped by like 80-something%. It went from like an average of an hour to an average of like 14 minutes or something like that in terms of like how long meetings were. But the frequency of meetings went up significantly. People they went from having, a meeting with their peer group once a week or once every 2 weeks to maybe meeting with their peer group 3 times a day. But for 15 or 20 minutes each. And I thought that's really cool. What that shows is that when scheduling a meeting means you are making people stop whatever their rhythm is and their individual parts of the business to get together, you feel like you have to honor that by having it be long enough to be worth it. You don't want to say we're going to schedule a meeting for the peer group, once every quarter and it's going to be 15 minutes long. It's like, that doesn't seem important enough if it's only 15 minutes long. So let's make it 3 hours long. Well, what if you only have 15 minutes worth of stuff? Doesn't matter. We'll find ways of filling it, But when you're not together in the same building anymore, when you have to meet via a Zoom call, then it's okay to say, hey, we're going to do a touch base, 15 minutes, and then go back to work. And those happen more and more often. And employees reported a higher level of engagement with that rhythm versus the occasional meeting that was filled with fluff or nothing. And I think that as we start, returning back to work and more people are going back to offices, I think we really should do whatever we can to keep that element with us, to make sure that we are honoring people's time by saying, you know what, sometimes we don't need a 4-hour meeting just because it takes time to schedule everything. We need to kind of like pay it homage by making it an entire day or a half day. No, it's okay to have these little one-off meetings or multiple times a week if that's what is needed in order to make sure that people are level set on the same page, but they're not being, kind of forced into taking time out of their rhythm to talk about things that mean nothing.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.